It was a rainy evening in Vermont, the kind that made the world seem softer, a little quieter, a little lonelier. The golden light from the kitchen spilled through the window, and Evelyn stood there, lost in thought, as the rain tapped gently against the glass. The sound reminded her of all the quiet nights she'd spent waiting for life to feel full again, waiting for something to change. It had been 3 years since her husband, Michael, left. 3 long years of pretending everything was fine for her son, Ethan, who had just turned 21. Evelyn had poured herself into work and motherhood, but somewhere along the way, she forgot what it meant to live, to feel. That night, something was different. Ethan came home early from college, drenched in the rain, his hair a mess, his gray sweatshirt clinging to his shoulders. He dropped his backpack by the door and looked at his mother. For a moment, neither spoke. It was just a look, but it was enough to make Evelyn's heart skip. There was something in his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just her son's gaze, it was maturity, a quiet strength that took her by surprise. The boy she had raised was gone. Standing before her was a man. "Mom," he said softly, setting his jacket aside. "You didn't have to wait up." "I wasn't," she lied with a gentle smile. "I just couldn't sleep." He smiled back, tired but warm, and that one look, that simple, honest look, made her realize how much she had missed the closeness between them. Over the years, they had drifted. She had been too busy hiding her loneliness, and he had grown too independent to notice. But tonight, it felt like the universe was giving them a second chance. As they sat down for dinner, Evelyn watched Ethan quietly. His voice had changed, deeper, steadier. His hands looked like his father's, but his eyes were hers. "College life treating you well?" she asked. He nodded, his fork playing with the mashed potatoes. "It's fine, but I missed home." Her chest tightened. He missed home. Those words felt like sunlight after a long winter. "Really?" she teased gently. "You used to say this house felt too small." Ethan chuckled, his dimples showing. "Maybe I just needed to grow up to see what I had." For a second, their eyes met again, and that look, that deep, silent connection, made her heart ache. It wasn't romantic, but it was emotional, powerful. It was the moment she realized her little boy had turned into someone who saw her not just as a mother, but as a person. After dinner, Evelyn made tea while Ethan dried the dishes. Their conversation flowed easily, laughter mixing with the sound of rain. It was the first time in years that she felt seen. Later that night, when she went to her room, she sat on her bed, smiling softly to herself. That look he gave her, filled with warmth, understanding, and care, had stirred something deep inside. It reminded her that love wasn't just something that existed between couples. Sometimes, it was the pure, unspoken bond between two souls who had survived heartbreak together. But just as she was lost in that thought, a soft knock echoed on her door. "Mom, you still awake?" It was Ethan's voice, calm but uncertain. She quickly wiped her eyes and said, "Yeah, come in." He stepped in, hesitated at the doorway, then said, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I don't say it enough." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart." He smiled faintly. "No, I do. You've done more for me than anyone ever could." There it was again, that look, deep, gentle, and full of something she couldn't quite name. Maybe pride, maybe love, maybe it was simply the connection of two hearts who had been through too much and still found a way to stay strong. When he left the room, Evelyn sat there, unable to move. That one look, full of sincerity and warmth, had shifted something inside her. For years, she had felt invisible. But tonight, her son's eyes told her she wasn't forgotten. She wasn't alone, and yet deep in her heart, she sensed that something more was beginning to unfold. Something unexpected, because sometimes, love doesn't come in the ways we expect. Sometimes, it begins quietly with just one look that changes everything. The next morning, the Vermont sky was pale and calm after the storm. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, touching the wooden counters with warmth. Evelyn stood by the stove, humming softly, the smell of coffee filling the air. She hadn't slept much. Her mind kept replaying that moment from last night. That one look from Ethan had stirred something she didn't know she'd been missing. When he finally walked in, his hair still tousled from sleep, she couldn't help but smile. "Morning," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Morning," he replied, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." "So are you," she teased, handing him a mug. He took it, their fingers brushing for a moment, a simple, accidental touch, but one that lingered quietly in the space between them. Evelyn quickly turned away, pretending to focus on the toast. They sat down together, eating breakfast as the light shifted across the table. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. "Mom," Ethan began, breaking the silence. "I was thinking, maybe I should stay home for a while, take some classes online, help out around the house." Evelyn looked up, surprised. "You'd give up college life for this?" He smiled faintly. "Not give up, just slow down. Being here feels right. Like I can finally breathe." Her heart ached in a strange, beautiful way. For years, she had prayed he'd come back home. But now that he was offering, she felt torn. He was growing, and she didn't want to hold him back. Yet, the thought of having him near again filled her with quiet joy. Later that day, as they cleaned the attic together, old memories surfaced: boxes of Michael's books, photo albums, toys from Ethan's childhood. They laughed, sneezed from the dust, and for a while, it felt like time had turned back. Ethan found an old photo, the three of them at the beach when he was 5. "You looked happy here," he said. "I was," Evelyn admitted softly. "We all were." He looked at her for a long moment. "You still deserve that kind of happiness." The way he said it, gentle, sincere, made her heart skip. There was no judgment in his tone, only understanding. That same look she had seen last night flickered in his eyes again, and it reached deep into her soul. She smiled, trying to steady her voice. "Maybe someday." He nodded. You've spent so much time taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time someone takes care of you." Evelyn froze for a second, unsure what to say. No one had spoken to her like that in years. His words weren't just comforting, they were real. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of gold and pink. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was calm, almost tender. Ethan leaned back, looking at her with quiet admiration. "You know," he said, "you're stronger than you think." She turned toward him. "You think so?" "I know so," he said simply. For a moment, their eyes met again, that same deep, knowing gaze. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense, but there was an emotional pull, an understanding that went beyond words. Evelyn felt seen, cherished, even healed. But just as she was about to speak, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face changing slightly. "It's Dad," he said quietly. Her heart sank. "What does he want?" Ethan hesitated. "He said he's coming back to town. Wants to talk." Evelyn looked away, her fingers tightening around her cup. The peace she'd felt all day began to fade, replaced by a storm of old memories. Michael's absence, his cold goodbyes, the heartbreak that had nearly broken her. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked softly. She nodded, though her voice trembled. "I'm fine. It's just unexpected." He reached out, his hand resting over hers, warm, reassuring, protective. That look again, the one that started everything, passed between them once more. Only this time it was deeper. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," he said quietly. Something inside her shifted, not because of the words themselves, but the feeling behind them. That promise, that quiet loyalty, meant more than he could ever know, and for the first time in years, Evelyn realized she wasn't afraid of what was coming next. Because sometimes, the person who changes your life doesn't arrive as a stranger. Sometimes, it's the one who's been beside you all along, waiting to be truly seen. But as the evening darkened, and the wind whispered through the trees, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that Michael's return would change everything again. Only this time, she wouldn't face it alone. The next few days felt heavier, like the calm before a storm. Evelyn tried to keep things normal, cooking, working, tending her garden. But deep down, she knew Michael's return would stir old wounds she had worked hard to bury. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed unusually protective, always nearby, always watching her with that quiet, steady concern that both comforted and confused her. It wasn't just the look of a caring son, it was something deeper. Something filled with emotion that neither of them could easily name. One morning, Evelyn found him in the garage, fixing an old chair that had belonged to Michael. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. Ethan smiled, brushing sawdust from his hands. "It was broken for years. Thought maybe I could fix it for you?" She watched him, her heart warming. He was so thoughtful, not the impulsive boy who once slammed doors and disappeared into his room when things got hard. This was a man. Calm, patient, and gentle. "You've changed," she said quietly. He looked up. "I had to. Someone had to be there for you." Her chest tightened. "Ethan," he shrugged, but his eyes told the truth. The same eyes that had looked at her that rainy night. The ones that had broken the silence between them. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. Evelyn froze when she opened it. There he was, Michael, the man who had once been her everything, standing on the porch like a ghost from another lifetime. "Evelyn," he said, forcing a smile. "You look Well, she didn't answer. Years of heartache tightened her throat. Ethan appeared behind her, his voice firm. What do you want, Dad? Michael sighed. I just want to talk. Maybe start over. Evelyn felt her heart twist, anger, confusion, maybe a bit of sorrow. Start over, she repeated, her voice trembling. After 3 years of silence, he lowered his eyes. I made mistakes. I want to fix things. Ethan stepped forward, standing slightly in front of her, almost instinctively protecting her. You had your chance, he said, calm but cold. Ethan, Evelyn whispered, touching his arm. It's okay. But her hand lingered there, not just to calm him, but because she could feel the warmth of his strength grounding her. It was strange, how the boy she once comforted was now the one protecting her. Michael's gaze shifted between them. You do seem close, he said, a hint of unease in his tone. Evelyn's heart pounded. There was nothing wrong with what he said, but the way he said it, like he was searching for something, unsettled her. She stepped back, clearing her throat. We've been through a lot, she said simply. Ethan's been my rock. Michael nodded slowly. I can see that. After a few tense minutes, he left, saying he'd call again soon. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan turned to her. Are you okay? She nodded, though her hands were trembling. I'm fine, just overwhelmed. He reached out, his voice low. You don't have to pretend with me, Mom. Not anymore. That word mom sounded different now. Softer, more emotional. When she looked up at him, the same look passed between them again, full of love, gratitude, and something she couldn't explain. Without thinking, she whispered, you remind me so much of him, but better. He smiled faintly. Then I'll take that as a compliment. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, Evelyn stared at the horizon. Do you ever think people can really change? She asked. Ethan leaned back, thoughtful. I think they can, but only if they want to. Some people wake up too late. Like your father. He nodded. Exactly. Evelyn sighed. He wants another chance. Ethan turned to her, his voice calm but firm. She didn't answer. The truth was complicated. Part of her longed for closure, but another part, a quieter, deeper part, had already found peace in the way Ethan looked at her, cared for her, and made her feel alive again. As night fell, the wind grew colder. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders, and Ethan gently placed his jacket over her. You don't have to, she murmured. I know, he said softly, but I want to. Their eyes met again in the dim porch light. That one look, the same one that had changed everything weeks ago, felt even stronger now. But it wasn't wrong. It was pure. It was love, reshaped by time, loyalty, and healing. And as the stars appeared above them, Evelyn realized something quietly powerful. Sometimes love isn't about romance or rules, it's about the unspoken connection between two hearts that refuse to give up on each other. But deep down, she also knew that Michael's return would test that bond in ways neither of them could imagine. Because some love stories aren't about falling in love, they're about finding it again in the most unexpected place. The days following Michael's visit felt different, not just for Evelyn, but for Ethan too. The air in their Vermont home carried a quiet tension, like unspoken memories floating between them. Yet, beneath it all, something new was taking root. Peace, perhaps. Or the soft promise of beginning again. Evelyn had spent most of her adult life keeping things together, but since Ethan came home, she had started to feel alive again. His kindness, his laughter, the way he saw her not as someone broken, but as someone strong, it had changed her. And now, with Michael trying to come back into her life, she felt a need to move forward, not backward. One evening, she joined a local charity group, a small community project for restoring an old library. It was something she'd wanted to do for years, but never found the courage. Ethan encouraged her. You should go, he said with a smile. You've spent enough time worrying about me. Do something for yourself this time. So she did. That's where she met Daniel Hart, a widowed architect from Burlington. He had kind eyes, a patient smile, and a quiet charm that made everyone around him feel at ease. Evelyn wasn't looking for romance, not after everything she'd been through. But there was something genuine about him. They started working together on the library restoration, planning designs, picking colors, and laughing over paint mishaps. Slowly, Evelyn found herself enjoying the moments, enjoying life again. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by the site to bring her lunch. When he saw her laughing with Daniel, his smile widened. You look happy, he said later, as they drove home. I am, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. It feels good to be part of something again. Ethan nodded, glancing at her fondly. You deserve that, Mom. You really do. That night, as they sat by the fire, Evelyn realized how much Ethan had grown, not just in age, but in heart. He had become the kind of man she always hoped he'd be: strong, caring, and full of quiet understanding. But something else changed too. Their home didn't feel heavy anymore. The silence was peaceful, not lonely. The look Ethan gave her now wasn't filled with unspoken sadness, it was pride. A few weeks later, Michael showed up again, this time asking to meet at a cafe. Evelyn agreed, though her heart no longer raced the way it once did. He looked older, tired, and regretful. "You've changed," he said softly. "I had to," she replied. "I couldn't stay broken forever." He sighed. "I thought maybe we could try again." Evelyn smiled gently, but shook her head. "Michael, you were part of my past. But my future, it's not with you." There was no anger, no bitterness, just peace. She had finally let go. When she returned home, Ethan was sitting on the porch steps, waiting. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," she said, her voice steady. "For the first time in a long while, I really am." He smiled, that familiar, heartwarming smile. "Then I'd say that's a win." As autumn turned the trees golden, Evelyn continued, seeing Daniel. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, it was gentle, patient, real. Ethan noticed how his mother's laughter filled the house again, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about her projects, and for him, that was enough. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Evelyn said quietly, "You know, Ethan, when your father left, I thought I'd never find joy again. But you reminded me that love doesn't end when someone walks away, it just changes shape." He looked at her, his eyes warm. "And now you're finding it again." She nodded. "Yes, but in a different way. You helped me believe I could." That one look from her son, the same one that started everything, met hers again. But this time, it wasn't about sadness or loss. It was about pride, gratitude, and love that had healed over time. And as the last light faded over the Vermont hills, Evelyn realized something profound. Sometimes the person who helps you rebuild your heart isn't the one who fills it with romance, it's the one who reminds you that you still deserve love. The journey that began with a single look had come full circle, from heartbreak to healing to hope. But life still had one more surprise waiting for her, one that would test everything she had learned about love, forgiveness, and starting over. Winter arrived early in Vermont that year. The first snow fell gently over the quiet streets, blanketing the town in white. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the flakes drift under the porch light. The world felt peaceful again, not empty, not lonely, just calm. It had been months since she last saw Michael, and in that time, everything in her life had shifted. The library restoration project was nearly complete. Daniel had become a steady part of her days, and Ethan her heart. Her anchor was finally planning to return to college. But before he left, there was something he wanted to say. He found her in the kitchen one morning, making pancakes, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. "You're humming again," he said with a grin. Evelyn laughed softly. "I guess I am." He sat down, watching her with that same warmth that had once broken through her sadness. "You know, when I first came home, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. But now, I think I can finally go back knowing you really are." She smiled, turning to face him. "You helped me get here, Ethan, more than you know." He shook his head. "You did that yourself. I just reminded you who you were." Evelyn placed a plate in front of him, her heart full. "You did more than that. You reminded me what love looks like when it's pure and patient." He looked down for a moment, his voice soft. "Daniel seems good for you." "I like him." She nodded. "He's kind. And he listens." "That's all that really matters," Ethan said. That afternoon, Daniel came by with flowers, simple daisies, Evelyn's favorite. They spent the day decorating the house for the holidays, laughter echoing through the rooms. Ethan watched them from the couch, smiling to himself. For the first time in years, their home felt alive again. When evening came, they all sat by the fire. Daniel talked about his late wife, Evelyn shared memories of when Ethan was a child, and the conversation flowed easily, full of warmth and honesty. As the fire crackled, Evelyn felt a quiet sense of gratitude. Life had not gone as she planned, but somehow, it had led her to exactly where she needed to be. Later that night, when Ethan stepped outside to bring in more wood, Evelyn followed him. The air was crisp, the stars bright above the snow-covered hills. "You're leaving tomorrow," she said softly. "Yeah," he nodded. "It's time, but I'll visit all the time, I promise." She smiled. "You don't have to promise. Just live your life fully, okay?" He nodded again, and then that look. The same one from that rainy night months ago, but this time, it was different. Not heavy, not uncertain, just full of love and understanding. The kind of look that said, "Thank you for everything." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. "That one look of yours," she whispered, "it changed everything between us." He smiled softly. "Maybe it just reminded us who we are." They hugged, the kind of embrace that held a lifetime of emotion, forgiveness, healing, and hope. When they pulled apart, Evelyn could see it in his eyes. Her son had grown into the kind of man his father never managed to be. The next morning, she watched him drive away, snow crunching under the tires. For a moment, she stood in the doorway, her heart both full and aching, the way a mother's heart always is when she learns to let go. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "He's a good man," he said. Evelyn nodded, smiling through her tears. "He is. He saved me in ways he'll never understand." Daniel kissed her temple gently. "And now it's your turn, to live, to love, to be happy again." She looked out at the road where Ethan's car disappeared into the white distance. "I think I finally know how." As the morning sun broke through the clouds, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, lasting peace. That one look from her son had changed everything, not because it was romantic or magical, but because it reminded her of the power of love in its purest form. Love that heals. Love that forgives. Love that sets you free. And as the snow continued to fall, Evelyn whispered to herself with a smile, "Sometimes, the greatest love stories don't start with romance, they start with a look that wakes your heart back to life." The end.